We're going to start the recipe for scallion pancakes. Scallion pancakes are ubiquitous in Taiwan. Songyobing is the name. Green onion pancakes, scallion pancakes. They're layered, flaky dough. Usually pan-fried, oftentimes served with breakfast. At Winsun restaurant in Brooklyn, we serve them alongside clams. We make a roll of beef shank with them. You can make breakfast sandwiches. The green onion scallion pancake is a very, very typical Taiwanese bread, and we've embraced it fully at Winsun restaurant. It's always, when we were raising money for the restaurant, we crowdfunded with a Kickstarter, and we sold classes on how to make pancakes, scallion pancakes, before we opened. So pancakes have always been intrinsically tied to our restaurant. Once we opened, we were so busy we couldn't keep up with making the pancakes. So we purchased them from an elderly Taiwanese lady who made dumplings, noodles, baozi, and songyobing, or scallion pancakes. Over the years, we've internalized the operation, and we have an entire facility dedicated to just making scallion pancakes, dumplings, bread, pastries. So today, we're going to walk through the simple steps of scallion pancakes that really only requires flour. It can be bread flour, it can be cake flour, it can be AP flour. I personally like bread flour for a softer texture. Green onions, one of the most important ingredients, and water. There's also pork fat or vegetable shortening, and salt and MSG to season. Okay, so we're just gonna take the flour and we're gonna insert it into the mixer, and we'll start it off on a low speed, incorporate the water until the dough comes together. You really want to push the hydration in this dough. So the wetter the dough, the better. It's hard to handle and it gets sticky, but that's okay. Once it starts to incorporate the flour and the water, we can turn it up to medium and let it go for about 5 minutes until all the flour and the water is fully incorporated. You want to be able to touch the dough and pull your hand away and barely not have dough on your fingers. But it takes a minute to get to that point. So it's easy to add too little water. You need to make sure you hydrate the dough as much as possible. It's not like focaccia at all, but in the sense that the softer and lighter and airier you want the pancakes to be, the more water you need to push. You need to push the dough to carry as much water as possible. And I'm going to show you how to lubricate the dough so you can work with a wetter dough and rest it properly after we form the dough and portion it into balls, and then we can make good scallion pancakes. I always use a little parchment when I'm working with flour. It makes it easier to manage flour without getting yourself dirty, especially when you're going into a tiny space like this. All right, we're gonna save this parchment paper here. When the dough comes out, we'll put it here so we don't mess up the counter. We wanna slowly add the water so we can make sure that we're not incorporating too much water. It takes a minute at a low speed for the dough to fully incorporate. Okay, once the dough has fully incorporated and there's no dry flour remaining, I turn the mixer up to medium speed, let it go for a few minutes, and then it's okay when you're taking it out, if it sticks to your hand a little bit. So I take it out and I put it directly onto a parchment with a little bit of oil. Most doughs you work with, you use flour to prevent the dough from sticking to surfaces or your hands. In this case, we use oil. That's something I've learned over the years. It's kind of counterintuitive if you're familiar with Western style baking or portioning. I'm not a pastry chef or baker, This is just my experience in trying to learn how to make scallion pancakes the best way possible. Okay, so once the dough is out of the mixer and it's a little greased, on the parchment paper, you can take a tablespoon of oil or vegetable shortening and just make sure it's nice and lubricated. And I just use a knife and we portion it out to, little squares, that will form into balls. But the portions will be 144 grams per portion, per dough ball. So you can start cutting, use the scale. All right. So this is going to be about 2 portions, maybe a little less. $138, it's totally okay. $145, it doesn't need to be perfect. Take the dough, tap it in the oil. 134, 142, 144, perfect. Now we can keep going until we've portioned all the dough into 144 gram portions. Okay, so now we're gonna go over a simple technique for shaping the dough. After you have the dough portioned into what's going to turn into dough balls, after we portion the dough, we dipped in the oil. So we have, they're well greased, and we just set the dough portions onto a clean work surface. After we portion the dough, which we're gonna do by making a circular motion with their hand and passing the dough balls between index and thumb, making a circular motion, and this is gonna form the dough ball. This is really important because when the dough ball is formed in a nice sphere, as much as possible, we'll set it to rest, and when the dough rests, that's when we can start actually making the pancakes. It's an important step of the process. So this is a simple step, but it's good to learn. So start like that. And you can do 2 at a time too, as well. So when resting the dough balls, everybody likes to say, if you look up recipes for these pancakes on the internet, people say rest it for 30 minutes. And it really depends on how much you hydrate the dough. So if you don't hydrate the dough enough, you don't have to rest it that much. But what's really important is the visual cue. So I would start at 30 and then gauge where the dough portions are. So they really need to deflate. So, and I actually learned how to make these pancakes from people from Puebla, in Mexico, who work in New York. They taught me how to make these pancakes in this particular way. And they actually say that they're ready cuando se ponen triste. That's something that I learned in New York City. Cooking for me has always been deeply correlated with Spanish language, and it's very satisfying, and I'm very grateful for the ability to communicate, because I've connected with so many different people along the way. But here we are cooking Taiwanese American fusion food, and I'm learning how to cook it through folks from Mexico. But it's just another layer of the global nature of how food tracks through different cultures. So cuando se ponen triste that's how we know that the dough is rested. So we wait 30 minutes. We'll cover this with some plastic wrap and let them set in not a cold place, but not a hot place either. Room temperature is fine, but after 30 minutes, we'll check and see if they deflated. But they really will sag and spread out, so they need space between, 3 inches or so. Okay, so you can see that the pancake, the dough balls that we portioned out earlier have completely deflated. Se han puesto triste. We have a couple cups of flour here, right? Quantity is unimportant. We just need the flour to, I'll show you. Now we're gonna roll the scallions into the pancakes. I'm using pork lard, Iberico pork lard, because I'm in Spain. But you can use manteca, any type of pork fat. You can use vegetable shortening, Crisco. You can use butter too. A lot of people use clarified butter. Just squeeze a little amount. Put a bundle of scallions in each pancake. If you put too many scallions, they'll break through the dough. So, the more the better. But if you go too much, then the dough will break. So, here we just roll it up. You can see how wet my dough is, which I like, because that to me means it's going to be soft. So after you have the dough rolled, from both sides, just coil inwards. If you have a thick piece of the dough, stretch it out, but you don't want to tear the layers, right? So, like that. So we're gonna do the same with the remaining 3 portions, and then we'll let it set aside and rest with plastic on top. Okay, so we've rested the coils for 30 minutes, and now we're gonna press out the pancakes. A special thing about the way we do pancakes at Winsun is that we never use a rolling pin. So it saves time, it prevents the dough from being overworked, but another important part is we always freeze our pancakes. It locks them into place. They're fragile. The dough is wet, it's sticky, and they're fragile. So when we freeze them, it kind of locks them into a disc shape, and then it keeps them good in the freezer for up to 2 weeks, right? Once after 2 weeks, the flour could start oxidizing. So prefer not to freeze them for more than 2 weeks, but storing them in the plastic wrap or parchment paper, it's an important part of the process. So simply use a little bit of flour for your surface. Until now we've been using oil, right? But you just simply press it out. And you really want to press it out less than you'd think you would, because we have the final shaping is going to be when we package them and put them away. A lot of people don't understand why it's so important, but I'm going to show you why it's important, saves you time, and it's efficient. If you work in a restaurant and you're using industrial plastic wrap, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, fold, and then fold those. With at-home plastic wrap, you do 3 at a time, right? If you work in a kitchen, you'll know what I mean. Okay, So we fold over 2 pancakes and kind of continue to form the pancakes under the plastic wrap. You know, a lot of the shaping is by hand, right? So fold this over here, and now you have a nice little bundle that's completely separated by plastic. So once you have the dough shaped, you want to set it on a flat tray and then put our plate, if you're at home, and just put it in the freezer. And then make sure it's stacked, and then once it freezes like this, it'll lock in shape. So after it's frozen and you're pulling it out of the freezer, you can set it on parchment paper on greased parchment paper, right? I'll show you what that looks like after these pancakes are frozen. Okay, so to cook the scallion pancakes, when you pull those packages that you made for yourself out of the freezer, you know, you can do this on a plate with single squares of parchment. Just cut it with a knife, or you know, a lot of times at the grocery store, you just buy parchment paper in smaller squares. This is industrial, so it's a little bit bigger, but you know, basically we you know, oil each piece of parchment and then set the frozen discs onto the parchment, and you see how they kind of locked into place while they froze. I really think that's an important part. Not everybody freezes their pancakes. Sometimes they're, you know, really good just by themselves alone right after you make them, but for me personally, the shape is important, especially if I'm making sandwiches. So I really like to freeze them, and it makes them all consistent. You know, if you're making them for yourself at home, maybe you don't care about consistency, but if I want all my sandwiches to be the same size, it's helpful for me to wrap them in those bundles. So you kind of want a liberal amount of oil, a few spoonfuls like I just did. Set it right in the pan. Season, a little salt and MSG. We're going to cook it both sides a couple times, and I'm going to show you the right texture, what it should look like at the end. So because the pancake has, you know, it's a coil, right? So the landscape of the pancake is uneven. So, you know, depending on what you're cooking on, you have to flip back and forth, maybe change the side of the pan. I prefer most to cook these on a flat top or a plancha, but you know, just keep flipping back and forth. And you want this golden brown crust. I want that all around. In Taiwan, most commonly, you'll see an egg cracked right onto the pancake, or right into the pan, and the raw pancake right on top of the egg. And then they kind of flip them and cook them together. That's what we do at our bakery when we're making breakfast sandwiches. We cook the pancake almost in the raw egg cooks into the pancake, and they cook together. So the raw egg, you know, it griddles, but it also steams from the cooking pancake, right? So it's a high water dough you know, for the pancakes. So there's a lot of steam happening as well. This is looking pretty good. Dab it off a little bit. And at the restaurant, we just serve sides of pancakes just like this. So at the restaurant, we serve these pancakes just like this, like a bread side. It's great for dipping, sopping up noodle sauces, or dipping into a clam broth. I just cut it in half and then cut it in even thirds like a pizza. And then here, I just made a little sauce of chili crisp and sweet bean paste. I made the sauce by mixing together some chili crisp and sweet bean paste. You can use anything from hoisin, cilantro, scallions, black vinegar, whatever your preference is, really. I like a chili oil, a crispy chili oil with that's cut with a little sweet bean paste. That, to me, you just dip it in like that.